Have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered why our cosmic neighborhood is so unique? Astronomers constantly discover bizarre alien worlds, dubbed super-Earths, which are essentially massive rocky realms that dwarf our home planet, yet weigh significantly less than frozen behemoths like Uranus or Neptune. These exotic exoplanets come in a wild variety of flavors, ranging from solid stone to swirling clouds of vapor, often swelling to sizes double or even 10 times the bulk of our own globe. While these distant spheres offer a tantalizing glimpse into galactic diversity, they lie impossibly out of reach, dominating star systems across the Milky Way alongside incredibly common shrunken gas worlds known as mini-Neptunes. Our galaxy is completely littered with these strange intermediate worlds, stunted gas giants and oversized rocky spheres. Yet our own solar family completely lacks them, trading them instead for a singular, undisputed cosmic heavyweight, Jupiter. Reigning supreme as the most colossal planetary body orbiting our local star, this gas giant wields an immense gravitational grip that essentially dictates the mechanics of our entire solar system. In fact, this majestic giant hides a brutal past as a planetary predator, having violently swallowed a massive infant world roughly 4.5 billion years ago during the chaotic dawn of our cosmic neighborhood. Picture a frozen rocky sphere packing 10 times the mass of Earth, slamming head-on into the young gas giant. A cataclysmic impact so fierce that it shattered Jupiter's central heart, churning its heavy elements right into the upper layers of helium and hydrogen. Over the eons, gravity slowly dragged those denser chunks back down to the deepest depths, eventually reforming the incredibly compacted core we theorize exists there today. Once a world eater, always a world eater. Astronomers heavily suspect that our ancient star system used to be absolutely crowded with massive celestial bodies before this orbital bully cleared the board. Take a look at the barren void surrounding Mercury right now. If you observed that same inner zone around alien stars, you would almost certainly find it crammed with mid-sized planets bridging the gap between Earth and Neptune. Let's rewind the clock. The infant days of our solar family were incredibly violent, defined by a baby star spinning amidst a turbulent, fiery whirlpool of primordial dust and raw vapor. Out of this cosmic blender, proto-worlds sprouted like seeds catching hold in fertile soil, with tiny rocky spheres baking in the scorching radiation right next to the stellar furnace. Meanwhile, massive gas clouds coalesced in the freezing outer darkness, far enough from the blazing sun to trap and hoard enormous oceans of volatile elements without them boiling away. Today, our planetary neighbors gracefully glide along serene, predictable tracks. But that modern harmony masks a brutally violent youth, where orbits were anything but perfect circles. These early worlds flew on wildly stretched, oval-shaped trajectories, launching them perilously close to the sun's scorching surface, before slingshotting them out into the freezing cosmic void. Think of it like a chaotic dance, where celestial bodies constantly shoved each other off balance with massive gravitational tugs. An era perfectly captured by a fascinating scientific model known as the Grand Tack Hypothesis. This mind-bending concept attempts to map out the first few million years of planetary evolution, proposing that our heavyweight champion, Jupiter, was actually dragged inward by the sun's inescapable pull. Eventually, it reversed course and migrated back outward, plowing through massive fields of cosmic rubble like a majestic sailboat smoothly maneuvering around a racing marker. This colossal joyride utterly devastated the smaller worlds trying to take shape nearby, and while Saturn's eventual birth helped stabilize the region, this theory suggests Jupiter essentially bulldozed everything in its original path. By acting as a gravitational wrecking ball, its massive migration triggered countless shattered worlds, and incredibly, this violent reshuffling may have slung the very first water droplets right to our home world, filling the vast oceans we enjoy today. Even now, this giant acts as a cosmic sheepdog, constantly corralling vast swarms of wandering space rocks. Occasionally, it launches these rocky projectiles like terrifying missiles toward the inner planets, or ejects them from the system entirely, meaning this planetary giant might literally be responsible for wiping out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. We all know the story of that apocalyptic space mountain smashing into Earth, leaving a catastrophic scar buried deep beneath the waves off the coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The resulting shockwave unleashed biblical tsunamis, shattering earthquakes, and fiery volcanic nightmares that completely reset the biological clock of our planet. Yet the actual origin of this killer rock, whether a metallic asteroid or an icy comet, remains a total mystery. A leading hypothesis proposes it was actually a frozen comet plunging inward from the Oort cloud, an unimaginably vast shell of icy shrapnel lurking at the absolute edge of our stellar neighborhood. That frozen bullet might have been nudged off its distant orbit entirely by Jupiter's massive gravitational muscle, turning our solar system into an incredibly high-stakes celestial pinball machine. In this cosmic arcade game, the largest gas giant acts as the ultimate flipper, aggressively kicking inbound icy wanderers onto a direct collision course with the inner solar system. As these deep space visitors dive dangerously close to the sun, intense solar gravity shreds them into lethal scattershot, eventually triggering the apocalyptic impact that ironically paved the way for small mammals, our distant ancestors, to inherit the Earth. Let that sink in for a moment. Without this massive, chaotic gas giant playing the role of both destroyer and protector, neither our blue marble nor humanity itself would likely exist. This absolute behemoth essentially barged through the early star system, pulverizing ancient super-Earths to construct a safe haven for our tiny world. And it might also perfectly explain the modern mystery of the missing Planet 9. Astronomers are highly confident a hidden phantom world is currently lurking in the icy darkness, way past Neptune, residing far beyond the familiar realm of Pluto. You can divide our stellar neighborhood into three distinct realms: the rocky inner sanctuary, the gas giant territory, and the frozen abyss beyond, where this elusive ghost planet, roughly the size of Mars or Earth, supposedly hides. Experts suspect this fugitive world once danced right alongside the giant planets before getting violently booted into the freezing cosmic outskirts, or perhaps exiled into deep space forever. But looking back at our planetary king, have you ever wondered what paints those iconic, swirling stripes across Jupiter's face? For decades, researchers assumed these mesmerizing bands of color were exclusively painted by incredibly fierce atmospheric winds, violently churning materials between different high-altitude layers. Today, the science is much clearer. Those brilliant pale bands, known beautifully as zones, are basically towering weather fronts where warmer gases are actively surging upward. Conversely, the deep, dark ribbons, referred to as belts, visually map out the massive regions where chilled atmospheric vapor is steadily plunging back into the planet's depths. Interestingly, the gravitational tug-of-war from its numerous orbiting moons might literally be stretching these weather patterns to create that striped aesthetic, while deep below those clouds sits a bizarre, intensely pressurized core of liquid metallic hydrogen, helium, and crushed heavy metals. If you could somehow travel upward from that hellish metallic heart, you would experience a steady, dramatic plunge in both crushing pressure and blistering heat. This extreme gradient forces the bizarre liquid interior to gently transition into a sprawling, gaseous atmosphere of purely hydrogen and helium. And while the exact boundary remains a mystery, scientists guess the planet turns into an ocean of fluid just a couple of thousand miles beneath its visible skies. Even if an impossibly massive cosmic vacuum cleaner stripped away all those swirling clouds, the remaining liquid core would still easily dwarf neighboring titans like Saturn. You've probably heard this giant romantically labeled as a failed star since it shares the exact same hydrogen-rich recipe as our Sun. But that dramatic nickname is scientifically misleading. The truth is, it simply severely lacks the colossal bulk required to crush its own core into igniting thermonuclear fusion, the ultimate spark that gives birth to true stellar engines. Theoretically speaking, absolutely any chunk of cosmic debris can transform into a blazing sun, provided you continuously dump enough raw material onto it. Once critical mass is achieved, the internal crushing pressure forces atoms to fuse and erupt into dazzling light. But to achieve this with Jupiter, you would need to magically multiply its current weight by a staggering 1,000 times. Even to just spark the dimmest, coolest red dwarf imaginable, you'd still need to smash at least 80 more Jupiters together, meaning you can sleep safely tonight knowing our biggest planetary neighbor won't suddenly ignite to give us a second sun. Could a cosmic giant actually devour enough neighboring worlds to transform entirely? If this massive gas giant kept snacking on passing celestial bodies, a radical change just might be possible. Think about this. Had it ignited into a blazing sun, the intense gravitational chaos would have completely shattered the delicate dance of all surrounding newborn worlds. Plus, the sheer blast of extrastellar radiation baking those nearby rocks would have utterly wiped out any chance for biological miracles to spark in our cosmic neighborhood. Picture a spinning top on overdrive. That is our reigning speed champion, whipping through an entire day in a mere 10 hours. Now imagine a beast, outweighing our homeworld by 300 times, hoarding 2.5 times the bulk of every other planetary neighbor combined. Yet weirdly enough, feeding it more would actually make it smaller. Packing on extra weight just cranks up the internal crush, squeezing the sphere so tightly that multiplying its bulk by 4 leaves its waistline exactly the same. Let us pause for a second, cosmic explorers. How deeply have you ventured into our local stellar backyard? Try to picture a heavyweight champion packing double the sheer bulk of every single neighbor tossed onto a galactic scale. Wrapped in a mesmerizing tapestry of swirling bands, this behemoth hides turbulent, freezing tempests of water and ammonia suspended in a vast sea of helium and hydrogen. Need another hint? Feast your eyes on this feature. Behold, the legendary Crimson Maelstrom, a furious churning hurricane dwarfing our entire globe that has been tearing across the skies for centuries. Spot on. We are looking at the king of the gas giants. But this raises a profound mystery. Is this colossal neighbor acting as our ultimate cosmic bodyguard? Or a looming threat? Right now, humanity is piercing its veil using a dedicated robotic probe, beaming back priceless secrets about a sphere so wide you could line up 11 Earths straight across its belly. To put that in perspective, hold up a tiny grape to represent us, and this titan sits next to it as a massive basketball, quietly patrolling the void 484 million miles from the central campfire. We humans love to think our vibrant blue oasis is the center of everything. But the brutal gravitational truth is that we are just guests, living in the realm of this true master. Taking up 75% of the total planetary real estate in our neighborhood, it boasts a staggering 318 times the heft of our fragile globe. In this arena, what the king dictates goes. If it feels like playing dodgeball with cosmic debris across the void, nothing stands in its way. Wielding a terrifying gravitational grip, it aggressively stirs the nearby debris fields, completely denying countless rocky fragments the chance to clump into anything bigger than a solitary dwarf wanderer. Operating on a relentless cosmic appetite, this behemoth ruthlessly swallows stray icy wanderers and rocky stragglers alike, practically treating them as casual snacks to pass the time. Whatever escapes its massive maw gets violently slingshotted away on wild, unpredictable paths into the dark. Throughout its 4.5 billion trips around the sun, this heavyweight has undeniably sparked unimaginable celestial carnage. Yet a fascinating twist remains. A brilliant faction of astrophysicists proposes that humanity owes its very survival to this monster, suggesting its greedy habit of inhaling lethal rogue debris acts as a vital cosmic vacuum cleaner, shielding us from doom. Conversely, a fierce debate rages on as rival stargazers completely reject this heroic narrative. These skeptics paint the giant as a reckless bully, intentionally kicking otherwise harmless icy drifters into erratic, deadly new trajectories. Which brings us to the ultimate deep space menace. Lurking way out past our most distant dwarf neighbors, massive frozen boulders silently drift within a vast, shadowy outer shell of our neighborhood. Occasionally, unseen forces punt these frozen missiles inward for a scorching flyby of our star. And whispered scientific legends hint that such an ancient icy bullet may have triggered the most cataclysmic dying off in our fossil record. Whenever these frigid wanderers dive toward the warmth, they inevitably tangle with the reigning heavyweight's gravitational webs. Tossing them around like toys, the king devours a few as frosty snacks, leaving us to wonder, is it deliberately kicking these cosmic torpedoes off a collision course with our fragile home? Or is this galactic prankster actually bending previously harmless rocks straight toward our backyard? the truth remains one of astronomy's greatest unresolved cliffhangers. Many stargazers whisper that this colossal sphere is essentially an aborted sun, brimming with the exact same primordial cocktail of elemental gases that ignite the heavens. However, lacking that critical threshold of sheer crushing weight, its heart remains dark, completely incapable of sparking the brilliant internal furnace that defines true celestial fire. True stellar engines operate by relentlessly crushing atomic building blocks together within agonizing infernos, a spectacular, violent forging process that spews out endless waves of blinding radiance. To actually light that atomic match, our local giant would need to swell by 75 times its present heft. Strangely though, packing in all that extra matter brings a bizarre twist of physics into play. Dumping tons of new material inside would dramatically ramp up the internal gravity, forcing the entire atmospheric envelope to violently crush inward. Scientists confidently predict that you could quadruple the weight of this beast, and the resulting intense compression would keep its outer waistline practically untouched. Orbiting this titan is a swirling family of 80 to 95 captive satellites. The one icy jewel currently steals the spotlight. A silent, frozen sphere harboring secrets from 4.5 billion years ago. Starved of warmth from a distant sun, this enigmatic rock wears an impenetrable armor of solid frost. Sitting right between our lunar companion and a distant dwarf in scale, this sixth child of the giant reigns as a supreme heavyweight among the stellar neighborhood's many moons. But the ultimate twist of this frosty tale? It might actually be breathing. Stargazers firmly believe this distant globe is our absolute best shot at uncovering alien biology hiding in the dark. The evidence points to an abyssal, lightless sea of briny water churning beneath the crust, plunging anywhere from 40 to 100 miles into the abyss. Sure, that liquid gold is locked beneath an unforgiving frozen barricade spanning 10 to 20 meters, yet the warm, murky depths down below possess all the necessary ingredients to nurture a biological miracle. Observational data suggests violent geysers of deep-sea moisture actually blast right through the fractured glacial shield, violently spewing hidden marine secrets into the void. Meanwhile, another cosmic riddle has haunted researchers: the planet's blazing invisible light shows. What kind of invisible sorcery powers these spectral glows? After 4 decades of head-scratching, the veil has lifted, revealing that highly electrified microscopic drifters are the true architects of this high-energy light display. These restless atomic specks slam violently into the upper atmospheric layers, igniting an explosive, silent fireworks show across the poles. The real head-scratcher was figuring out how this invisible fuel reached the sky to begin with, until cutting-edge observations caught these particles literally riding massive electromagnetic waves down into the storm clouds below. We unlocked this electrifying truth by combining the sharp robotic eyes plunging through the giant's realm with powerful spacebound observatories floating peacefully above our own globe. Back here on our familiar soil, such glowing tapestries are strictly confined to a narrow, high-latitude ring crowning our frozen extremes between 65 and 80 degrees. Have you ever wondered what happens when you travel past the 80-degree mark on other planets? Usually, the dazzling light shows fade into darkness. But Jupiter breaks all the rules with its wildly unpredictable X-ray auroras. Like a cosmic heartbeat, these brilliant flashes rhythmically beat near the planetary poles, often dancing to a completely different tune in the north compared to the south. Astrophysicists finally cracked the code, realizing this rhythmic throbbing directly mirrors the violent shuddering of the gas giant's own magnetic force field. Picture a spinning top dragging a massive invisible cape behind it. As this colossal world turns, it forcefully pulls its entire magnetic bubble along for the ride. When violent gusts of solar energy slam into this magnetic shield, the bubble squishes inward like a squeezed balloon, rapidly superheating all the cosmic debris caught inside. Those energized particles then surf down the magnetic pathways to spark a breathtaking atmospheric light show. But that is merely an appetizer before we explore this world's most legendary crown jewel: the Great Red Spot. Imagine a swirling tempest churning across the lower half of the planet, thrusting its turbulent peaks over 5 miles higher than the neighboring cloudscapes. To put its sheer scale into perspective, you could comfortably drop Earth into this vortex twice over with room to spare. If you stood near the outer bands of this beast, you would face relentless gales screaming at anywhere from 270 to 420 miles per hour. Winds that would completely dwarf the most destructive twisters on our homeworld. The local atmosphere is a chaotic, boiling pot of scorching vapors that continuously heave, plummet, and spiral, mirroring the exact weather patterns that drive storms right here on Earth. As freezing downdrafts collide with blistering thermals, they twist together to forge colossal cyclones. Stargazers suspect that eons ago, a cluster of these titanic tempests violently slammed together to birth the ultimate red leviathan. Today, the beast sustains its immortal fury by greedily feeding on freezing vapors sucked from the icy depths, while simultaneously dragging down blistering heat from the upper skies. To make matters more terrifying, this atmospheric predator actively swallows any lesser weather systems that cross its path, using their energy to grow even stronger. Yet the exact chemistry behind its iconic crimson makeup remains one of the solar system's greatest lingering puzzles. Over time, its complexion shifts dramatically, morphing from a milky peach hue to vibrant tangerine and sometimes a deep, rusty clay. Leading experts suspect the true origin of this cosmic sunburn is hiding deep beneath the swirling eye, plunging toward the gas giant's mysterious interior. Deep down, an invisible blanket of ammonium hydrosulfide chemicals could be engaged in a violent chemical reaction sparked by a constant bombardment of stellar radiation and harsh ultraviolet sunshine. While this chemical sunburn likely paints the tempest its stunning ruby shade, the idea remains a brilliant hypothesis waiting to be proven. Our dedicated telescope operators have kept a watchful eye on this swirling giant consistently since the 1830s. But the earliest confirmed sighting dates all the way back to 1665, when early stargazers dubbed it a permanent atmospheric blemish, which implies this relentless squall has been howling for nearly 4 centuries. Yet, in a bizarre twist, the new millennium brought a sudden and dramatic collapse in the storm's overall footprint. By 2019, observers watched in shock as the outer rims began to physically peel apart, shedding massive weather fragments into the surrounding void. Should this violent unraveling hold its current pace, we could see the iconic oval shrink into a perfect circle by 2040, or perhaps witness the ultimate demise of the solar system's oldest hurricane entirely. Imagine the panic of a major hurricane warning where everyone bolts for cover from 75-mile-per-hour gusts. Now multiply that terror as you envision an unstoppable vortex ripping through the atmosphere at an unfathomable 400 miles per hour. Can winds that extreme even physically exist? Absolutely. But you must leave our quiet blue marble and chart a course for the largest world in our solar neighborhood to witness them. Fasten your seatbelts, because our cosmic voyage to this gargantuan realm starts right now. You could effortlessly pack nearly 1,300 copies of our homeworld inside this bloated behemoth. Furthermore, it is a blazing inferno deep down, boasting a central furnace that burns at a mind-bending 43,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Sadly, touching down and planting a flag is completely impossible here. True to its classification, this world offers absolutely no firm ground to stand on. However, we can plunge our imaginations straight into the breathtaking depths of its churning sky. Picture yourself sinking past dense layers of mustard, crimson, chocolate, and ivory mist. These very vapor bands are the exact ribbons that paint the distant world with its famous tiger-striped complexion. As your imaginary vessel dives further toward the dark center, you would watch the surrounding oceans of hydrogen and helium slowly crush themselves from weightless vapors into a dense, swirling liquid. This bizarre phase shift is entirely driven by utterly crushing barometric forces. Down at the very bottom, the central heart remains a complete enigma. We still debate whether it is a gooey sphere of molten slush or a super dense stony pebble roughly 14 to 18 times heavier than Earth. But we did not travel hundreds of millions of miles just for a basic planetary geology lesson. Your true destination on this celestial safari is to witness the undisputed king of all storms. the Great Red Spot.
This colossal tempest wildly thrashes across the lower half of the planet,
aggressively thrusting its uppermost cloud peaks an astonishing 5 miles higher than the surrounding atmospheric roof, spanning a breathtaking distance that is 1.3 times the total width of our homeworld. The beast finally gave up some of its secrets when the Juno spacecraft performed a daring flyby in 2017. The robotic explorer revealed that this gargantuan cyclone plunges a staggering 200 miles straight down into the gaseous abyss. To put that vertical drop into perspective, it digs anywhere from 30 to 100 times further down than the deepest marine trenches on Earth. Yet, even those jaw-dropping numbers are likely underestimating the beast, as its hidden foundations might extend profoundly deeper into the dark. Interestingly, the swirling vortex actually acts like an enormous refrigerator, chilling the air significantly more than the surrounding skies. Remember that the baseline climate among the high-altitude cloud tops already sits at a freezing -234 degrees Fahrenheit. Conversely, as you drop closer to the planetary furnace, the heat intensifies exponentially. In a brilliant twist of cosmic irony, the most scorching pockets of air ever measured across the entire globe were strangely discovered hovering directly over this freezing red cyclone. Within that high-altitude hotspot, thermal readings skyrocketed to an incinerating 2,400 degrees. That is an atmospheric inferno burning hotter than freshly erupted magma flowing down an earthly volcano. Stargazers theorize that the violent churning below acts like an acoustic drum, firing off intense sonic and gravity ripples that crash into the upper atmosphere and ignite this extreme friction heat. Meanwhile, the tempest itself flips the script, boiling at its deep roots while remaining icy at its crown. Humanity has stood in awe of this migrating hurricane for well over a century and a half. A few decades back, experts were convinced this ancient beast was finally losing its steam and would inevitably shrink away into the history books. However, the universe loves to prove us wrong. After meticulously crunching a treasure trove of images beamed back from the mighty Hubble Observatory, scientists realized the storm had other plans. Astrophysicists were utterly stunned to find that the roaring gales along the hurricane's outer perimeter were actually accelerating. While the annual increase is merely a subtle nudge of 1.5 miles per hour every Earth year, that minuscule bump carries massive implications for the physics of this alien world. The outer bands of this monster now whip around at a completely mind-boggling velocity of 400 miles per hour. If you thought a Category 5 hurricane was terrifying, just remember that this cosmic wind outpaces the absolute deadliest twisters our planet has ever endured. Paradoxically, if you magically teleported directly into the eye of this ruby giant, you would find an eerie calm. The atmospheric circulation at the very heart crawls at a surprisingly sluggish pace. Unlocking the secrets of this gargantuan weather system has been an absolute nightmare for modern science. We are still entirely clueless about what cosmic gasoline keeps its engines running. Could the answer simply be the strange anatomical makeup of the planet itself? Because there are no continents or mountain ranges to crash into, this world lacks the crucial land-based friction that normally suffocates and kills massive storms right here on Earth. The scorching vapors enveloping the globe are locked in an eternal dance, relentlessly shooting upward, crashing back down, and twisting into violent vortexes, much like the familiar weather cycles we experience daily. As frigid currents slam into sweltering updrafts, they spin into mammoth atmospheric whirlpools. Astrophysicists paint a picture of a prehistoric era where a cluster of these massive cyclones violently merged, giving birth to the ultimate Crimson King. The beast now maintains its eternal rampage by siphoning frosty air from the dark depths and dragging scorching heat down from the stars. Furthermore, it operates as a ruthless cannibal, constantly eating smaller weather systems to fuel its endless wrath. Feasting on those lesser storms guarantees the vortex remains an unstoppable powerhouse. Sadly, the gas giant's impenetrable atmospheric smog continues to act like a locked vault, hiding the deep inner workings of this majestic storm from our prying eyes. Have you ever wondered what exactly lurks beneath the surface of Jupiter's most famous swirling hurricane? For decades, researchers assumed it might be a colossal volcano, but that simply doesn't add up.
Since this gas giant lacks a solid, crackable crust, subterranean lava simply cannot erupt into space. So what actually gives this iconic vortex its signature crimson tint? The hues constantly shift between chalky white, soft pink, vibrant orange, and deep rust. Experts suspect the secret behind these shifting tones is buried deep within the planet's atmospheric layers. One leading idea suggests that invisible, unpigmented gases are baking under the sun's intense ultraviolet rays. That solar reaction likely sparks the vivid crimson glow, though the true mechanics remain a fascinating mystery waiting to be unlocked. But the King of Planets does not hold a monopoly on massive tempests. Saturn hosts an Earth-sized hurricane of its own, creatively dubbed the Great White Spot. Roughly every 3 decades, this phenomenon erupts as a single dot before expanding violently, ultimately wrapping an enormous tail of pale clouds completely around the ringed world. Through careful observation, physicists realized this bright streak is actually a terrifying interconnected network of brutal lightning storms. In the highest atmospheric reaches, brilliant electrical strikes explode over 10 times per second. Yet the true origin of this immense power remains entirely unknown. While some researchers propose solar radiation as the fuel, others argue that such violent wind patterns could only be driven by a blazing furnace hidden deep within Saturn's core. Raging planetary hurricanes, however, are just one piece of the cosmic puzzle that continues to baffle the scientific community. Consider Pluto, the heavyweight champion of our local dwarf planets, boasting an incredibly tall atmospheric shield neatly stacked into over 20 distinct layers. Each of these bands is unimaginably frigid and incredibly dense. Surprisingly, even our own moon clings to a fragile atmospheric shell known as an exosphere, woven from traces of helium, neon, and argon. This lunar veil is 10 trillion times thinner than the air we breathe right now. But as we drift deeper into the cosmos, we encounter far more dangerous anomalies, like gravity wells. These celestial beasts possess a gravitational pull so immense that they swallow light itself, occasionally mimicking the explosive power of a massive galactic volcano. Rather than oozing molten rock during these unpredictable tantrums, they blast out unfathomable waves of energy, carving massive voids through neighboring clouds of cosmic dust. In fact, researchers recently stumbled upon one of the most gigantic impact cavities ever observed in the known cosmos. Advanced X-ray and radio observatories captured the aftermath of an ancient, violent eruption from a supermassive gravity well located 390 million light-years from our pale blue dot. The resulting blast radius is so mind-bogglingly vast that you could cram 15 entire Milky Way galaxies inside it. With forces that destructive out there, you might want to reconsider touching down on uncharted worlds. Take the exoplanet K2141b, for example. From a distance, this distant world seems eerily similar to our own terrestrial home. It features a fully functioning weather cycle with evaporating oceans, thick clouds, and heavy rain. Except those storm clouds are dropping solid stone instead of water. The entire landscape is submerged beneath magma oceans plunging dozens of miles down, while daytime temperatures spike to a blistering 5,000 degrees. That relentless heat literally boils the molten rock into a vaporous haze, which is then whipped violently toward the dark side of the world by supersonic gales screaming at 1 mile per second. Once in the shadows, that gaseous stone rapidly cools, liquefies, and plummets back down as a devastating shower of molten rubble. Definitely not your ideal holiday destination. Let's return to something a bit more familiar. Think of the iconic permanent markings on a wild tiger. Now, picture those same animal stripes magically shifting in width, hue, and placement right before your eyes. That mesmerizing shape-shifting trick is precisely what Jupiter does every single day. What fuels this bizarre planetary morphing? Astrophysicists are finally beginning to untangle the mechanics of this colossal celestial body. Viewed from the deep void of space, the planet resembles an incredibly vivid, swirling sunrise painted across a massive canvas. The vibrant atmosphere displays a stunning spectrum of milky yellows, deep toffee browns, and striking hints of azure. And much like the star at the center of our neighborhood, it is forged predominantly from hydrogen and helium. Yet, during the dawn of the cosmos, It failed to collect enough stellar mass to ignite into a blazing sun. Thus, it settled into its role as a monumental sphere of gas, so unimaginably enormous that you could easily drop over 1,300 Earths into its belly. Across its equator and poles, contrasting ribbons of illuminated and shadowy clouds wrapped the sphere in what looked like cosmic racing stripes. Astronomers classify the shadowy bands as belts and the radiant, brighter ribbons as zones, a phenomenon that isn't actually entirely exclusive to this gas giant. Believe it or not, our own home world shares a surprisingly similar atmospheric circulation system. While humanity's blue marble features only a handful of these weather bands, Jupiter flaunts dozens of them. So what paints these swirling currents in such rich shades of mocha and cream? It comes down to a chemical cocktail of basic gases interacting with exotic trace minerals, blending together much like an artist swirling pigments on a palette to craft breathtaking dynamic landscapes. Thanks to this infinitely deep atmosphere and familiar climate mechanics, the giant serves as an incubator for the most extreme meteorological events imaginable. What appears as a serene painted watercolor from millions of miles away is actually a chaotic, raging war zone of atmospheric turbulence. Imagine an eternal, violent cyclone festival. Fascinatingly, these adjacent belts and zones are actually zooming around the planet in completely opposite directions. The darker belts stubbornly fight against the globe's natural rotation, while the brighter zones sweep harmoniously alongside the planet's spin. These distinct weather currents don't just pass each other horizontally. They hover at entirely different vertical elevations, with the belts acting like boiling carbonation rising to the top of a soda. Because the zones are essentially atmospheric sinkholes, the crests of the belt clouds tower majestically over them. Ultimately, despite sharing basic aerodynamic principles, comparing terrestrial weather to Jovian chaos is a fool's errand. It is like comparing a gentle breeze to a nuclear explosion. This brings us back to the undisputed king of all tempests, that legendary crimson hurricane. Why the vibrant ruby hue? Researchers suspect that this particular vortex towers significantly higher than the surrounding cloud decks. As a result, it absorbs an incredibly concentrated blast of unfiltered solar radiation, much like standing on a soaring mountain peak where the blinding sunlight hits you long before it warms the valleys below. Have you ever wondered what exactly paints the violent skies of an alien world? Up in the Great Red Spot, relentless sunlight beats down on the atmosphere, cooking up a wild brew of trapped gases like ammonia and acetylene. That intense solar radiation sparks a brutal chemical reaction, essentially dyeing the entire tempest its iconic, fiery crimson. Think of it as Mother Nature pulling off high-budget movie magic right in deep space. Sure, those majestic planetary stripes are absolutely gorgeous, but what is the burning secret hiding behind them? The plot thickened when astrophysicists finally plunged their instruments 30 miles beneath those churning clouds. Once they ripped away that outer veil, what they found was completely bizarre. By swapping their standard lenses for infrared vision, researchers watched the famous colored bands of the gas giant perfectly flip-flop. Those milky, pale zones we usually see suddenly vanished into pitch black under thermal imaging, while the typically murky, deep-hued belts lit up like a neon sign. What does this unexpected light show tell us? It turns out the dark strips are actually regions where the atmospheric canopy is stretched incredibly thin. Picture the belts as wearing a sheer, breathable fabric, while the lighter zones are bundled up in heavy, puffy winter coats. Because those belts lack heavy insulation, the blistering heat from inside easily blazes right through on thermal cameras. That lack of atmospheric clutter creates a literal window into the abyss. Yet that is not even the wildest piece of the puzzle. Clockwork chaos strikes every couple of years, throwing the entire Jovian climate into absolute overdrive, as those beautifully painted bands undergo a total color swap. The entire meteorological system practically loses its mind during these phases, leaving some of our brightest astronomers totally baffled for decades. To crack the case, humanity dispatched a high-tech robotic detective named Juno to get up close and personal with the gas giant. Ever since 2016, this orbital sleuth has been hoovering up data, keeping a particularly close eye on the massive, invisible magnetic bubble wrapping the planet. Similar to our home world, a colossal force field completely envelops this giant, stretching far out into the frozen void of space. This vast energy dome is crucial because it acts as the ultimate cosmic armor. It endlessly deflects deadly solar radiation and highly charged space shrapnel away from the atmosphere. Because we are dealing with the heavyweight champion of our solar neighborhood, its defensive aura is exponentially more brutal than anything we have down here. These unseen forces are birthed by a planetary dynamo, essentially a churning, boiling ocean of conductive fluid, violently pirouetting deep inside the core. After grinding through years of telemetry from our orbital spy, researchers spotted subtle, rhythmic ripples pulsing through that energy grid, perfectly mimicking the rolling swell of an ocean tide. In astrophysics circles, they call these shifting rhythms torsional oscillations, though really it just means the magnetism is sloshing back and forth. The entire world is essentially grooving to its own electromagnetic beat. To wrap our heads around this, picture the core of the gas giant as a massive, bubbling cauldron of stew, plunged in the dark depths. Sluggish thermal rivers operate exactly like freight elevators, hauling blistering core temperatures all the way up to the visible cloud decks. But what happens if an invisible hand grabs a massive ladle and furiously whips that broth into a frenzy? That is exactly what those magnetic sloshes do. They violently churn the interior, completely destroying the steady flow of ascending heat. That internal chaos instantly rewrites the forecast high above. It is the astronomical equivalent of blasting the stove to max and watching the pot completely boil over. The delicate balance of falling and soaring atmospheric gases shatters, transforming the sky into an absolute blender of violent storms. While hunting for clues, astronomers stumbled upon a bizarre, supercharged magnetic node hovering right near the equator, now known as the Great Blue Spot. Shockingly, this massive vortex is hitting the brakes, signaling that an entirely fresh rhythm of magnetic waves is gearing up to ripple through the planet. Piecing all these cosmic breadcrumbs together led the experts to one incredibly elegant theory. Those deep-seated electromagnetic ripples are sabotaging the internal heat elevators, throwing the outer atmosphere into a state of absolute meteorological anarchy. By crunching the numbers, researchers realized the schedule of those subterranean magnetic sloshes lines up flawlessly with the exact moments the planet repaints its iconic stripes. Simply put, that invisible shifting energy grid hidden deep in the core is the ultimate puppeteer, pulling the strings on those shifting celestial bands. We are finally snapping the border pieces of this cosmic jigsaw into place. While the exact mechanics remain a bit fuzzy, we are one giant leap closer to decoding the darkest secrets of the void. Yet, the dark expanse always holds a few more secrets up its sleeve, meaning our robotic sentinels will need to keep their electronic eyes glued to the gas giant for decades to come. Watching those majestic storms morph over the coming years will be the ultimate acid test, proving whether our brilliant theories hold water or need a total rewrite. From continent-swallowing cyclones to those breathtaking painted rings, the king of the planets remains an endless source of absolute awe. It might have failed to catch fire and become a sun, but this colossal sphere of gas still rules our night sky with unmatched majesty. Stay hungry for the unknown, and never stop looking up. Orbiting this behemoth is a staggering entourage of 79 confirmed moons, with the undisputed stars of the show being the 4 massive Galilean satellites, a nod to the legendary astronomer himself. First spotted way back in the 17th century, this quartet shares a chaotic family tree while boasting totally alien personalities. Take Europa, the runt of the literal litter, measuring exactly 1,860 miles across. This frozen world completes a lap around its host every 3.5 days, though humanity did not catch a good glimpse of its face until early probes flew by in the 1970s. What did those cameras reveal? A blindingly bright crust made entirely of frozen water, brutally scarred by jagged, mile-wide ravines that snake across the globe for thousands of miles. Astrophysicists suspect those brutal stretch marks are the result of intense gravitational tug-of-war, violently ripping the ice sheet apart as an unseen subterranean sea sloshes around underneath. The game completely changed in 2012, when massive geysers of water vapor were caught blasting 125 miles into the void near the southern pole, giving us a free taste test of the deep without ever needing to touch down. Underneath that 10 to 15-mile thick shell of ice, experts suspect lies a sprawling, pitch-black ocean, plummeting anywhere from 40 to 100 miles straight down. Despite being just a quarter of the size of our home world, this little ice ball hoards double the amount of liquid water found on all of Earth, making it arguably the ultimate hunting ground for alien biology. Mind-blowingly, researchers believe that entire frozen outer shell is completely unattached from the rocky core, slowly drifting over the abyssal waters to complete a full spin once every 12,000 years. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie hidden beneath the frozen shell of an alien world? When you look closely at snapshots captured by the Galileo probe, you will spot tiny, chocolate-colored freckles roughly 6 miles wide, which blistered up when scorching, lightweight slush bubbled to the top. This rising slush violently fractured the icy skin, or shoved it entirely out of the way, creating jagged, mangled patches known as chaos terrains that sit like rugged islands in an otherwise glassy sea. Around the waistline of this moon, you might find towering, blade-like ice shards jutting 50 feet into the air. We see miniature versions of these frozen daggers in the parched, high-altitude deserts right here on our home planet. However, the icy blades on Earth look like mere toothpicks compared to the giants on Europa. Just think about our own moon, battered with well over 5,000 massive impact scars stretching wider than 15 miles. Europa, on the other hand, is remarkably unblemished, boasting a fresh face that cannot be older than 50 million years, which tells us that its outer shell is constantly melting and paving over its own history. Because this frozen sphere is practically as polished as a cosmic billiard ball, making it one of the sleekest objects orbiting our sun. It reflects a dazzling amount of light, glowing 5 times more brilliantly than the moon in our night sky. Yet, this beautiful world is constantly hammered by a lethal storm of radiation from its massive host planet, packing enough punch to end human life in a matter of hours, all while orbiting 5 times farther out in the cold dark than we do. At that immense distance, the warmth of the sun is practically a myth, locking the landscape in a deep freeze where equatorial temperatures plunge to a bitter minus 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and the poles freeze solid at minus 360 degrees. Now, let us shift our gaze to a much more explosive mystery uncovered about 40 years ago, when the Voyager 1 probe buzzed a rocky neighbor named Io and crowned it the undisputed king of cosmic volcanoes. Sitting securely in the 5th slot from the giant gas planet, this restless world has been spinning through the dark for 4.5 billion years, making it practically a twin in age to its massive parent. If you placed it next to our own moon, you would notice they share incredibly similar dimensions, gravitational pulls, and densities, though most other satellites drifting out there are just giant snowballs made of dirty ice and minerals. Io defies that trend completely, forging itself instead out of dense iron and tough rocky minerals, and wrapping itself in absolutely breathtaking glowing atmospheric light shows. These dancing lights pulse and flicker continuously as the small globe races around its host, hovering a mere 260,000 miles above those swirling turbulent gas clouds. Imagine standing on that treacherous surface and gazing upward. The striped behemoth above you would dominate the horizon, appearing nearly 40 times larger than the full moon does to us. The cosmic scenery would be nothing short of breathtaking, especially considering this hyperactive satellite sprints around its entire orbital path in just 42.5 hours, while our sluggish companion takes almost an entire month to do the same. As it whizzes around, intense gravitational tugs stretch the very crust of the moon up to 330 feet high, much like how the moon pulls our vast oceans back